Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds called Those Old Scientists, which was directed by Jonathan Frakes, and which, of course, is the crossover episode between Strange New Worlds and The Lower Decks, which Paramount Plus released early because they showed the episode to folks at San Diego Comic-Con, and I guess they figured they may as well release it to everyone else. So they did, and it aired on a Saturday, which is very cool. Anyway, as the episode starts, we're in Lower Decks land. It starts off in animation with a log from Boimler about how the Cerritos is on its way to scan a portal that was originally discovered by Captain Pike, apparently. Of course, he's excited about scanning the portal, but Mariner is not. And he tries to get her excited by talking about how they're going to be standing in the same spot as crew members from the Enterprise when they discovered it. And he calls number one numero una. When they actually get down to the planet and are scanning the portal, Boimler expresses a wish to have lived back in the past when the portal was actually discovered by the Enterprise. And when Rutherford takes a photograph, a hollow photograph, it somehow activates the portal, and he gets thrown out on the other side into the past and is found by Spock, Una, and La'an, whom he says look very realistic. After this cold open, the Strange New Worlds intro plays, and it's rendered in animation in the style of Lower Decks, which was very cool. When Boimler wakes up, he tries to end a holodeck program because he thinks that's what he's in. Once he realizes where he is, he starts freaking out, especially when he sees number one. He then can't stop obsessing about the technology of the past or making comments that he shouldn't about the future, and ends up spending time back on the planet near the portal with M'Benga and Spock to try to investigate what happened. But he ends up having to get beamed up to the ship with Spock and M'Benga when an Orion ship shows up, which he tells Captain Pike is probably a science ship, which turns out to be incorrect as the Orions steal the portal from the planet and take off. During all of this, on a couple of occasions, Boimler saw Spock laugh and smile, and he thinks that he accidentally changed Spock by being in the past. So he tries to warn Chapel about it, but of course, he's been acting that way since before he got there, at least partly because of her. And it was very interesting because it reinforces the fact that Spock is different on the show, which, I mean, we knew. But it also buttresses the explanation for it that we've been getting in drips and drabs up to this point, that he's not that guy yet, that he's younger and, experimenting and so forth. So I thought that was cool that they sort of spelled that out, because otherwise it's kind of like an elephant in the room. Anyway, Boimler then makes some adjustments to the Enterprise while the crew avoids looking so that they can track the Orions, after which they do in fact encounter them again and make a deal with them to get the portal back so that they can try to send Boimler back to his time. But when they try to do it, what actually happens is Mariner comes through. As they're talking to each other in the way they do, Una notices that their references when they're talking to each other are very specific. Mariner tells Boimler that she wasn't prepared for how hot young Spock is. Turns out that they need a specific element to make the portal work again, and there isn't any in the quadrant, so they're going to try to make it in the lab, which is very dangerous. Boimler continues to shy away from number one like he's afraid of her, and Mariner tells her that he's just kind of a fanboy who has a poster of her up in his bunk. We then get a moment where it seems like Boimler has actually screwed up the past, because the deal that Pike made with the Orions involved trading some grain with them that was meant for a specific planet. And then because there was no more grain that could be taken to the planet, the folks living there had to be relocated, which wouldn't have happened if Boimler hadn't helped the Enterprise catch up to the Orions. So, yeah, he changed the past. Anyway, after talking with Pelia, because he's disappointed about all these things, Boimler decides to steal a shuttle along with Mariner to try to trade the portal back to the Orions to get the grain back, but he doesn't get to do that because La'an catches them. Pike has to talk with our time travelers to tell him to stop encouraging the crew to throw him a birthday party, which he doesn't want because he is, for the first time, going to be older than his father was before he died, and he was estranged from his father. So I guess it just brings up bad memories. Anyway, during this conversation, Mariner makes a reference to the NX-01, and it causes Boimler to have a realization and formulate a plan to get he and Mariner home. It turns out that there's some of this element inside the Enterprise because when it was made, they took a piece of the hull from the previous ship bearing the name and put it on board somewhere as per tradition. And that material happened to be used in the building of the NX-01. Before going back to the portal, Boimler explains to number one that the poster he has of her in his bunk is a recruitment poster, and that she's a big reason that he joined Starfleet because of what she went through at her trial and the Latin phrase ad astra per aspera, which means to the stars through hardship, which was the title of the second episode. So they go down to the planet where they find the Orions waiting because they thought they were going to get the portal back. But Pike convinces them to let them use it when he explains that he'll allow history to record that Orion scientists discovered the portal, which oddly satisfies them, and they leave. They end up back in their own time safely, and as the episode ends, we get a scene on the Enterprise where the senior crew is relaxing in Pike's quarters, but they're all cartoons, and they attribute this to the fact that they're seeing things because they're drinking some type of Romulan alcohol. And that's where the episode ended. So I think this episode works as a Lower Decks episode more than a Strange New Worlds episode because, on the Lower Decks, we're used to them, first of all, being extremely silly. And secondly, regularly running into cast members from other shows, be it the folks on DS9, be it the Troy Rikers, be it others via the holodeck. So it completely made sense as a Lower Decks episode. But because they are so goofy, they didn't really fit in with Strange New Worlds, even though Strange New Worlds has had its share of goofiness. So as I was watching it, I had to think of it as, okay, this is a Lower Decks episode because it worked in that context. So I'm not sure why. I guess they didn't want to have the whole thing be animated. The trick was to bring the animated characters into the real world. So I don't know. I think they still could have done it as a Lower Decks episode. It doesn't really matter. It would have been the same episode. Anyway, it works because it's crossed over with that, and that show is that way, and so it worked. So I just kept thinking of it in the framework of, okay, this is Lower Decks. Beyond that, I can't really say I thought too much of it because usually on the Lower Decks, there's some kind of character growth between Boimler and Mariner, or even Tendi and Rutherford, and it makes all the silliness worthwhile. But I didn't see where there was any of that in this episode, really. Like, they have this experience and they bear it well enough, but it's not, nothing really comes of it for, the characters in terms of character growth. Certainly none of that occurred with the Strange New Worlds crew. So there wasn't a lot of substance to it. It was just sort of an hour of shenanigans. As we're saying, I did like that they brought up the fact of how different Spock is. Because as the audience, we see that he's different. And they had said some things about, well, he's going through a thing with his emotions, and, he in fact spent some time as completely human. And so as the audience, again, we see that, okay, this is, these are the indications of why he's different here versus later. But it was cool to have Boimler show up and go, yeah, in the future, he's not like this. He's very stoic and serious. And to have Chapel then say, well, he's experimenting with emotions and stuff. So they got it out there like in spelled out fashion, where they say, okay, yes, he is different, and this is why, and don't worry, in the future, he's going to be that guy again. So I thought that was pretty cool. I liked how they animated the opening sequence of Strange New Worlds. I like how they animated the final scene. I thought that was pretty cool. But, I didn't like how, like I said, he does actually change the past because of that one planet that now has to relocate. And I wasn't really buying the whole thing where the Orions just went, okay, cool, we'll leave because you're going to say that Orion's discovered it and that's good enough for us. Like, no, no, I just didn't buy that. I mean, they tried to play it off like, the Orions don't like the stereotype that they're all pirates. And so that would have been a big deal to them. But I didn't think it worked, even though we know that in the future, Federation society has recognized that not all Orions are pirates, and there are actually Orions in Starfleet. So that's cool and everything, but it didn't really work for me as a reason why they would just say, okay. So I think they might have been better off just making that some random alien race that stole the portal. I don't know. I mean, especially considering it was a time travel portal, which they told them. Like, you think they'd be like, "Yeah, we're not leaving. There's a time travel portal." Like, I don't know. I didn't think that that made sense. So, you know, not a terrible episode. I mean, this show is always leaps and bounds better than Discovery. Discovery is terrible. This show is always better than Discovery, and once again, it was better than Discovery this week. So, you know, I'm happy enough with it, I guess. That's about it. There wasn't anything special about it, and I'm really bummed because this is episode 7 out of 10. There are only 3 more, and this season has been kind of lackluster. It hasn't been great. It's been okay. It's been a show where you go, "Oh, okay, that was an hour of Star Trek," but it hasn't been horrible like Discovery or the first 2 seasons of Picard, where you go, "Ugh." But it also hasn't been anything special. And with 3 episodes left, they haven't addressed Cybok. They brought up Cybok last season and briefly showed him like from the back, but they haven't gone back to that. So I'm wondering, we got 3 episodes left. Are they going to go back to that? And we know, thanks to a preview from San Diego Comic-Con, that next week's episode is going to be a musical episode, which I'm absolutely looking forward to, by the way. I think it's going to be crazy cool. So that might be the great episode this season. But are they going to address Cybok? Are they going to do anything else significant this season? Like, I don't know. I don't know. This season kind of seemed bland so far. But like I said, leaps and bounds better than Discovery, heads and shoulders above Discovery in terms of quality stories. So I don't know. I guess we have to look at it that way. But that's really it. I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back to review the next episode once it's released. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.